The rain was relentless, hammering against the window of our cramped New York apartment, as if the city itself was trying to drown out my thoughts. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, when the creak of a floorboard snapped me upright. My roommate, Ethan, stood in my doorway, his silhouette trembling in the dim glow of the streetlights, and I knew in that moment my life was about to unravel. Ethan wasn't supposed to be here not like this. We'd been roommates for 6 months, splitting rent in a shoebox apartment in Brooklyn, our lives tangled in the mundane rhythm of shared groceries and late-night takeout. He was the quiet one, always sketching in his notebook, his hazel eyes flickering with thoughts he never shared. I, Lucas Carter, was the opposite: loud, restless, a 24-year-old graphic designer chasing deadlines and dodging commitment. We worked because we didn't ask too much of each other. But that night, as the rain poured, Ethan crossed a line. "Lucas," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the storm. "Can I sleep here?" He gestured vaguely toward my bed, his cheeks flushed, his hands fidgeting. I froze. Ethan, my straight-as-an-arrow roommate, wanted to climb into my bed. My heart pounded not out of desire, but panic. I wasn't out to him. I'd spent years curating a careful mask, dating women casually to keep questions at bay. The idea of Ethan, of all people, breaching that boundary sent my mind spiraling. "You. What?" I stammered, sitting up, clutching the blanket like a shield. His eyes darted away, and I saw it: vulnerability, raw and unguarded. "I just can't sleep," he mumbled. "Nightmares." "It's stupid." But it wasn't stupid. It was dangerous. I didn't trust myself to navigate whatever this was. So, I did what I always did when cornered. I deflected. "Hey, I'm actually meeting someone tomorrow," I blurted. "This guy? Caleb. Total catch. You'd like him." It was a lie, half-baked and desperate, but Ethan's face shifted, curiosity replacing the tension. "Caleb?" he asked, stepping back. "You never mentioned him." I forced a grin, my mind racing to flesh out this fictional savior. "Yeah, he's new. Barista. Funny. You'll see." Ethan nodded, retreating to his room, and I exhaled, unaware I'd just set a trap for myself. The next morning, I needed Caleb to exist. I couldn't let Ethan suspect I'd lied to dodge his request. So, I scrolled through my phone, landing on a guy I'd met at a coffee shop a week ago: Caleb Nguyen, a 25-year-old barista with a sharp wit and a smile that could melt steel. We'd flirted briefly, nothing serious, but I texted him anyway, begging for a coffee date to sell the story. To my shock, he agreed. Caleb met me at a cafe in Williamsburg, his dark hair falling into his eyes as he leaned across the table, teasing me about my emergency date. He was effortless charming, with a laugh that made my chest ache in a way I wasn't ready to unpack. "So, what's the deal?" he asked, sipping his latte. "You're using me to impress someone, aren't you?" I laughed, dodging the truth, but his gaze pinned me down. "Fine," I admitted. My roommate's acting weird, and I needed a buffer. Caleb raised an eyebrow, amused. "I'm flattered to be your human shield." We spent hours talking, the conversation flowing like we'd known each other forever. He told me about growing up in Seattle, his Vietnamese heritage, his dream of opening his own cafe. I shared stories of my chaotic family in Chicago, my fear of being stuck in a cubicle forever. It was easy, too easy, and by the time we parted ways, I realized I wasn't pretending anymore. Caleb wasn't just a distraction, it was trouble. Back at the apartment, Ethan was waiting, his sketchbook abandoned on the couch. "How was Caleb?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes searching. I shrugged, playing it cool. He's great. We're hanging out again. Ethan nodded, but there was a flicker of something jealousy. Hurt? I couldn't tell. All I knew was that my lie was growing legs, and I was running out of ways to control it. Over the next week, Caleb became a fixture in my life. We texted constantly, met for late-night walks, shared cheap beers on rooftops. He was openly gay, unapologetic, and his confidence made me question every wall I'd built. Meanwhile, Ethan grew quieter, his late-night visits to my doorway replaced by long silences. I caught him staring sometimes, his pencil hovering over his sketchbook, and I wondered what he wasn't saying. Was he struggling with his own feelings? Or was I projecting, caught in my own confusion? One night, Caleb invited me to a gallery opening in Manhattan. Bring your roommate, he said, smirking. I want to meet this guy who's got you so spooked. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Ethan, to my surprise, said yes, pulling on a jacket and following me into the night. The gallery was crowded, alive with color and chatter, but all I could focus on was the tension between the three of us. Caleb was his usual charismatic self, cracking jokes, while Ethan lingered on the edges, his gaze darting between us. Nice sketches, Caleb said, nodding at Ethan's notebook, which he'd brought along. Ethan flushed, mumbling a thank you. I watched them, my stomach twisting. Caleb was my shield, but he was also a mirror, reflecting truths I wasn't ready to face. And Ethan was a question I didn't know how to answer. As the night wore on, Caleb pulled me aside, his hand warm on my arm. Lucas, he said softly, you're not fooling anyone. Not me. Not him. My heart stopped. What do you mean? I asked, but he just smiled, sad and knowing. Figure it out, he said, before slipping back into the crowd. I turned to find Ethan watching us, his expression unreadable, and I knew I couldn't keep running. The gallery's lights dimmed, casting long shadows across the room, and I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. Ethan's gaze lingered on me, heavy with questions I wasn't ready to answer, while Caleb's words echoed in my mind. You're not fooling anyone. I wanted to run, to drown the tension in another round of drinks. But the truth was closing in, and I was out of places to hide. Back at the apartment, Ethan broke the silence. Caleb seems nice, he said, his voice tight as he tossed his jacket onto the couch. I nodded, avoiding his eyes, busying myself with a glass of water I didn't need. Yeah, he's cool, I said, but the words felt hollow. Ethan stepped closer, his hands stuffed in his pockets, and I could feel the weight of his unspoken thoughts. Lucas, he started, then stopped, his jaw tightening. What's going on with you two? I laughed, too loud, too forced. Nothing's going on. We're just hanging out. But Ethan didn't buy it. He took another step, close enough that I could smell the faint cedar of his cologne. You've been different since he showed up, he said, his voice low. Distant. Like you're avoiding me. My pulse raced. He was right, but not for the reasons he thought. Caleb was my excuse, my shield, but he was also waking something in me I'd buried for years, something Ethan's late-night visit had stirred. I'm not avoiding you. I lied, but my voice cracked, betraying me. Ethan's eyes softened, and for a moment, I thought he might reach out, might say something to shatter the fragile balance we'd built. Instead, he turned away, grabbing his sketchbook and retreating to his room. The door clicked shut, and I was alone with my cowardice. Caleb, meanwhile, was relentless. He texted me the next morning, inviting me to a rooftop party in Bushwick. No pressure, He wrote, "But I think you need this." I didn't want to go, didn't want to face the way he saw through me. But I couldn't stay in the apartment with Ethan's silence suffocating me. So, I went. The party was loud, chaotic, a blur of neon lights and pulsing music. Caleb found me by the edge of the roof, a beer in his hand, his smile softer than usual. "You're a mess, Lucas," he said, not unkindly. I laughed, rubbing the back of my neck. "Thanks for the vote of confidence." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "You're scared. I get it. But you can't keep using me to dodge whatever's going on with Ethan." I froze, the truth landing like a punch. "I'm not," I started, but he cut me off. "You are. And it's okay. But you need to figure out what you want." Before I could respond, he leaned in, his lips brushing mine in a kiss so brief it felt like a dream. My heart stopped, then surged, a mix of fear and longing flooding my veins. I pulled back, my mind reeling. "Caleb," I stammered, but he just smiled, stepping away. "Think about it," he said, disappearing into the crowd. I didn't sleep that night. Caleb's kiss lingered, a spark I couldn't extinguish, but it was Ethan's face that haunted me. The next day, I found him in the living room, sketching furiously, his knuckles white around the pencil. "You okay?" I asked, tentative. He didn't look up. "You didn't come home last night," he said, his voice flat. I swallowed, guilt twisting in my gut. "I was with Caleb," I said, and the words felt like a betrayal. Ethan's pencil stopped. "Do you like him?" he asked, still not meeting my eyes. The question hung in the air, heavy and sharp. I wanted to say no, to tell him Caleb was a distraction, a shield, but the truth was Messier. I did like Caleb's ease, his courage, the way he made me feel seen. But Ethan was something else, something deeper, something I was too afraid to name. "I don't know," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan looked up then, his eyes raw, vulnerable. "You don't know a lot of things, do you?" he said, and the bitterness in his tone cut me to the core. He stood, tossing his sketchbook onto the couch, and walked out, leaving me with nothing but the echo of his words. Days passed, each one heavier than the last. Ethan withdrew, spending hours at the library or locked in his room, while I threw myself into Caleb's orbit, desperate for clarity. We went on more dates, movies, diners, a quiet walk through Central Park. Caleb was patient, never pushing, but his presence was a constant reminder of what I was avoiding. One evening, as we sat on a park bench, he took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my skin. "Lucas," he said, "you're allowed to want this. You're allowed to be who you are." His words broke something in me, a wall I'd built to keep myself safe. I wanted to kiss him, to let myself fall, but Ethan's face flashed in my mind, his quiet intensity, his trembling voice that night in my doorway. I pulled my hand away, my chest tight. "I need time," I said, and Caleb nodded, his eyes kind but resigned. "I'll be here," he said, "but don't take too long." When I got home, Ethan was waiting. His sketchbook was open on the table, a drawing of me staring back me face, unguarded, captured in soft pencil strokes. "You drew me," I said, my voice catching. He didn't look away this time. "I see you, Lucas," he said. "I always have." And in that moment, I knew I couldn't keep running, not from him, not from myself. The apartment felt smaller after Ethan's confession, the air thick with everything we hadn't said. His sketch of me lay between us, a silent accusation, and I couldn't look away from the vulnerability in his eyes. I wanted to speak, to bridge the gap, but fear clamped my throat shut, and all I could manage was, "I need some air." I fled to the fire escape, the city's hum a poor distraction from the chaos in my chest. Ethan saw me while I saw me, and it terrified me. I'd spent years hiding, convincing myself I could outrun my own truth. I wasn't out. Not to my family. Not to most of my friends. Being gay wasn't a label I'd claimed. Not because I was ashamed, but because I was afraid of what it would cost me. And now, Ethan, my quiet, unassuming roommate, had cracked that facade wide open. Caleb texted me as I sat there, the cold metal of the fire escape biting into my palms. "You okay?" he wrote, and I could hear his voice, gentle but probing. I didn't reply. Instead, I thought of his kiss, the way it had felt like freedom, and then of Ethan's trembling silhouette in my doorway. Two men, two paths, and I was caught between them, paralyzed by my own indecision. The next day, I avoided Ethan, slipping out early for work, burying myself in deadlines. But he was waiting when I got home, his sketchbook closed, his hands steady for the first time in weeks. "We need to talk," he said, and there was no escaping it. I nodded, sitting across from him, the couch a battlefield between us. "Why did you lie about Caleb?" he asked, his voice calm but cutting. I flinched. I started, but he shook his head. "You did. You made him up that night, didn't you? When I asked to sleep in your room." Shame burned my face. He was right, and there was no point denying it. I panicked. I admitted. "I didn't know what you wanted, and I wasn't ready." Ethan leaned forward, his eyes searching mine. "What are you so afraid of, Lucas?" he asked, and the question hit like a wave, pulling me under. I wanted to tell him everything about the years I'd spent pretending, about the fear of losing my family, my friends, my carefully constructed life. But all I could say was, "I don't know who I am." He didn't push, didn't judge. Instead, he reached for his sketchbook, flipping it open to a new Paglia drawing of two figures, blurred at the edges, standing close under a starry sky. "This is us," he said quietly. "Not perfect, not clear, but together." My throat tightened, and I realized he wasn't just talking about the drawing. He was offering me something to chance, a choice, a truth I wasn't sure I could accept. I didn't answer him that night. Instead, I called Caleb, needing his clarity, his courage. We met at a diner, the kind with sticky tables and endless coffee refills. He listened as I poured out my confusion, my fear, my tangled feelings for Ethan. "You're not choosing between me and him," Caleb said, his voice steady. "You're choosing between hiding and living." His words were a lifeline, but they also hurt, because I knew he was right and I knew I was falling for him, too. The next week was a blur of tension. Ethan and I tiptoed around each other. Our conversations clipped, our silences heavy. Caleb, meanwhile, gave me space, but his absence only made me miss him more. I was caught in a tug-of-war between two men who saw me in ways I couldn't see myself, one a mirror of my fears, the other a beacon of my possibilities. Then came the night that changed everything. Ethan knocked on my door, his face pale, his hands shaking. "I need to tell you something," he said, and before I could respond, he stepped closer, his voice breaking. "I'm in love with you, Lucas. I have been for months." The words hit like a thunderclap, stealing my breath. I stared at him, my mind racing, my heart torn between fear and something deeper, something real. "I don't know what to say," I whispered, and it was the truth. Ethan's confession was a gift, but it was also a weight, forcing me to confront the parts of myself I'd buried. He didn't wait for an answer. Instead, he leaned in, his lips brushing mine in a kiss so tentative it felt like a question. I didn't pull away, but I didn't kiss him back either. Not yet. When he stepped back, his eyes were wet, but he smelled a small, broken thing. Take your time, he said, echoing Caleb's words. I'll wait. And then he was gone, leaving me alone with a choice I couldn't avoid anymore. Ethan's kiss lingered like a bruise, tender and impossible to ignore. I spent the next day wandering the city, from the crowded streets of Times Square to the quiet paths of Prospect Park, searching for answers in the chaos of New York. My heart was a battlefield, torn between Ethan's quiet devotion and Caleb's fearless honesty. But the real war was within me, between the man I pretended to be and the one I was afraid to become. I called Caleb that evening, needing his voice to ground me. We met at his cafe, the place quiet after closing, the air thick with the scent of coffee and cinnamon. He didn't ask about Ethan, didn't push, just handed me a mug and sat across from me, his eyes steady. You look like you're carrying the world, he said, and I laughed, the sound brittle. Feels like it, I admitted. I told him everything: Ethan's confession, the kiss, the way my carefully built walls were crumbling. Caleb listened, his face unreadable, and when I finished, he leaned back, exhaling. You love him, he said, not a question. I opened my mouth to protest, but the words wouldn't come. Because he was right. I loved Ethan, had loved him for longer than I'd let myself admit. But I loved Caleb, too, his courage, his light, the way he made me feel like I could be enough. I don't know how to do this, I said, my voice breaking. Caleb reached across the table, his hand covering mine. You don't have to choose between us, he said. You have to choose yourself. His words were a mirror, reflecting the truth I'd been running from. I couldn't love either of them until I stopped hiding. That night, I went home and found Ethan on the fire escape, his sketchbook abandoned, his gaze fixed on the city lights. I sat beside him, the silence heavy but not uncomfortable. I'm sorry, I said finally. For lying. For pushing you away. For everything. He turned to me, his eyes searching. You don't have to be sorry, he said. You just have to be honest. So, I was. I told him about Caleb, about the kiss, about the way both of them had cracked me open. I told him I was gay, the words spilling out like a confession, raw and terrifying. And then I told him I loved him, because it was true, and because I was done hiding. Ethan didn't speak at first, just pulled me into his arms, his heartbeat steady against mine. I'm not going anywhere, he whispered, and for the first time, I believed him. But love wasn't a tidy resolution. I met Caleb the next day, needing to close the circle. I told him about Ethan, about my choice to stop running. His smile was bittersweet, but he hugged me, his embrace warm and forgiving. You're going to be okay, Lucas, he said. And if you ever need a coffee, you know where to find me. I laughed, tears stinging my eyes, and walked away knowing I'd lost something precious but gained something vital, myself. Months later, Ethan and I were still navigating our new reality. It wasn't perfect. There were fights, fears, moments of doubt, but it was ours. I came out to my family, my friends, each step a small victory. Some embraced me, others turned away, but I was no longer hiding. Ethan's sketches filled our apartment, each one a testament to the life we were building, messy and beautiful. One evening, as we sat on the fire escape, the city alive below us, I thought of Caleb. He'd sent me a text that morning, a photo of his new cafe, his smile as bright as ever. I'd smiled back, grateful for the man who'd been my shield, my distraction, my mirror. He'd helped me see myself, and in doing so, He'd help me find Ethan. I leaned against Ethan, his arm warm around me, and realized the rain that had started this all was gone. The sky was clear, the stars bright, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Love, I'd learned, wasn't about choosing one person over another. It was about choosing to live, fully and fearlessly, as yourself.